What personality type are you? What motivates your behavior? Discover the answers to these fascinating questions on Types, Your Personality Revealed. Hosted by personality experts Katherine and David Fauvre.
Welcome to Types, Your Personality Revealed. My name is David. My co-host Katherine and I are experts in personality typing. This is our fourth show in our ongoing series in which we're exploring personality types and what motivates each of us to do what we do. In our last show, we took a fascinating look at tri-type, a revolutionary advancement in the field of Enneagram personality typing. We learned that based on decades of research, we each actually have 3 Enneagram types, not just one. Further, that the ego uses these 3 Enneagram type strategies in a preferred order. In this show, we're going to explore a different personality typing system altogether that is both simpler and more powerful than the Enneagram. This system reveals your core survival strategy and is known as the instincts, or the instinctual subtypes when used in combination with your Enneagram type. Your core survival strategy can be explained by one of 3 instinctual drives. As a matter of survival, these all-pervasive instinctual drives determine nearly everything we think, feel, and do, from what we want in relationships, to how we want to spend our time, how we keep ourselves safe, and even how we dress and act as consumers. If you have the self-preserving instinct, you focus mainly on your own physical survival. If you have the social instinct, you equate survival with a sense of belonging. If you're a sexual instinct, you see intimate bonds in one-to-one relationships as your key to survival. These 3 instinctual types can be used alone or used in conjunction with the 9 Enneagram types, creating in effect 27 unique personality type combinations. We are each unconsciously motivated by the same 3 survival strategies throughout every minute of every day. Understanding your primary instinct and the instincts of those in your life can dramatically improve your relationships at home and at work. It can also improve your psychological health, and for many, it reveals what is in the way of accelerating personal and spiritual growth. In this show, we will spend the first half giving you an introduction to the instincts and then do an interview with a panel of 3 exemplars, with one of each instinct. You may want to determine your own instinctual type before you watch the rest of the show. To do that, you can take our instincts test online at enneagram.net. Next, Katherine is going to share with you more about the instincts and what our research has revealed.
All 3 instinctual types have extraordinary gifts, and all 3 instinctual types can be difficult and problematic. The instincts arise in the belly in reaction to a perceived threat to survival, whether real or imagined. When this happens, our personality goes on red alert and deploys the dominant instinct to protect us. Over time, through trial and error, we develop strong convictions about what we should or shouldn't do to be safe. These convictions can keep us from seeing other possible solutions. We need to use all 3 instincts, but we tend to overuse one in particular. The key is to recognize which instinct is running and in charge. For example, we all need to focus on resources to make sure we have what we need when we need it. This is the strategy of the self-preserving type. We also need to track who is doing what with whom to know who might help us in an emergency. This is the strategy of the social type. In addition, we need to develop and maintain close, intimate bonds with a select few to make sure there is a special someone that will protect us when all else fails. This is the strategy of the sexual or one-to-one type. Very early in the research, it became clear that there was a stacking order of the instincts, a particular way in which we use them. I found 3 patterns. One pattern is to have a single instinct that is dominant. This makes it easy to identify which type is in charge. The second pattern is to have 2 instincts that are very close to one another. This makes it a little more difficult to identify which type is in charge because they act in tandem with one another. The third pattern occurs when the instincts are like stair steps. When this happens, the three instincts cascade into one another. Regardless of the pattern, one instinct is always dominant and in charge. With this knowledge, we can learn to recognize the root cause of our negative emotions and begin to interrupt habitual behaviors that cause distress. More importantly, when we understand the needs and concerns of the dominant instinctual drive, we can begin to develop and sustain more meaningful and lasting relationships.
So, as we begin to explore the instincts, a very simple and powerful way to understand how they work is to look to the animal kingdom. With animals, there's really only 3 different survival strategies that they use. And we see that in humans, we actually use these same strategies ourselves. So in the animal kingdom, an animal can survive on its own and take care of itself. This can be, for example, a snake that finds its own food and mostly lives alone. In humans, this drive we call the self-preserving instinct. The other way that we see animals survive is in a herd, or in a flock of birds, or in a school of fish. Here, the animal survives by tracking and knowing what the other animals of the same kind as itself are doing. And in humans, we call this the social instinct. The third way that we see animals surviving in the wild is through mating, finding a pair. And we see this particularly with animals like foxes or penguins, where they will actually mate and stay together for a long period of time, both procreating and protecting themselves. So when we take that same drive and we look at it in humans, we call it self-preserving, which is the search for security and well-being. For someone else who might be a social instinct, their main drive and motivation is the search for others, groups, and community. And then the last is what we call sexual or one-to-one, which happens to be the type that Katherine and I are.
Yeah.
And this is the search for a mate and intimacy and pair bonding. Another way to think about this is that there's a part of us that's our hindbrain that has to make sure that we are biologically alive by the end of the day. That's all that its job is there to do. It's not about trying to give us a personality or something more sophisticated than that. All it's doing is trying to make sure that we literally survive to dinner time. This is the way we like to think about your instinct. That part of ourselves, as you can see in the example, we think of as like a stick figure warrior because it hasn't yet developed out a big personality, but its job is protection. And there's, again, 3 ways to do this. If you're self-preservation, the basic unconscious dictate is I am my body and I must take care of myself to survive. If you're a social, this part of you is basically looking at all of us, and the identification is I am my group and I must join with others to survive. And the third, which we call sexual or one-to-one, is it's all about you and me. And this again happens to be our particular type, and as a couple this influences everything that we do. We do a lot of work with couples, and the instinct is really important in understanding their dynamic. And so for the sexual instinct, the unconscious identification is I am my relationship and I must have a mate or a best friend to survive. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Katherine?
With the self-preservation instinct, it's really about my body. You know, what does my physical body need in this moment? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I sleepy? Whatever is essential to feeling comfortable. And with the social, it's like, what are they doing? And why are they doing what they do? And who's friendly? Who isn't? And with the one-to-one, it's like, are we in sync? Are we matched? Are we a pair? Are we going to be able to take care of each other? Will you watch my back? I'll watch yours if you watch mine. And we'll be a unit.
So before we begin to go deeper into understanding each of these, people will often say, how do I know which instinct I am? And I kind of have a little joke, but it's actually very true, which is where I'll say, what makes you behave badly?
Right.
And invariably, if your ego is triggered, which means you're in a bad mood, you're upset, you're having trouble in a relationship, some way your instinct has been threatened, because its job is to make sure that you survive. And as we now know with evolutionary psychology, we did not evolve from humans that overestimated their ability to survive. We evolved from those that underestimated it. So your instinct is designed to sound an alarm bell if the tiniest thing gets threatened in its area that it considers that you need for your security.
Right.
And that is incredibly important to begin to understand this, which is why when you learn it, you can begin to deal with that alarm bell and make different choices. So next, we're going to take a look at some examples of the self-preservation instinct.
I would add to what you said, David, that again, it's real or imagined. So if I just think in my mind that we're out of sync, then it's stressful to my personality, whether it's real or not.
Exactly.
And that's critical, and that's a good way to start to begin to look at the three instincts. And with the self-pres, it's about food, shelter, clothing, time, energy, money, all the things that take care of us.
So now let's take a look at a video montage of some people that identify with the self-preservation instinct. How did you know that your instinctual subtype was self-preservation?
I find that I need a lot of quiet time, and I'm always saying there's never enough time, energy, or money to do all the things that I want to do.
You know, my day-to-day life really revolves around sort of basic necessities, I would say, food and shelter and, you know, just sort of down-to-earth type of things, like what do we really need?
I never had enough. We burn wood at our house for heat. Every time I take wood away, I think I won't have enough.
Whether it was the bank account or running the house or providing for the future, that became dominant.
So what we see here with all three examples is they're talking about the needs of the body. So this survival strategy basically is, if my body's okay, I'm okay. And so they keep talking about things like basic necessities, time,
Quiet
money,
time.
Right, having quiet time. So Katherine, can you explain this collage and how this helps us understand self-preservation even more?
Yes, self-pres is about food, shelter, clothing, time, energy, money. You can see the word traditions and economic anxiety. Now, we're all worried about that right now, but overall, the self-pres person wants things that taste good, cost less, quality, things that endure, things that are practical, functional, and especially the way they dress. They'll be a little more conservative than the other two instincts, and a little quieter in their presentation and style.
Yeah, I was just in Portland last week, and it was amazing to me because compared to here, the way everyone dressed was all self-preservation. It was all about wearing clothes for rain or comfort or durability. Whereas if I go down to Los Angeles, it looks...
Yeah, Hollywood.
Or Hollywood, you know, then we get the sexual subtype.
It's all about the flash.
Our instinct really, it comes out in all kinds of different ways. And if we look at the research, the basic desire is for security. It's security for the body, and that trumps the relationship. And then the fear is of not surviving. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, what I'd add is the relationship could be a resource. It could help with survival. So the self-pres sees everything equally. You need all things to be comfortable. And the fear of not surviving is that I could be annihilated. What could go wrong? Things, if I eat this food and I don't feel well, then I can't do well on the show. And the mind will track everything that's potentially a threat to the body and to a sense of well-being.
So this is a type where if their unconscious tells them that there's any potential problem physically, what happens for them? They start to get anxious, or what
They
happens?
fret. This is the type that's most inclined to fret, to be ill at ease, to push to have the security of resources that make them feel safer.
Now, this type sounds kind of selfish to me, but my understanding is that's not true.
They're all three selfish.
Right.
It's what are we going to be selfish about? What are we going to really pay attention to? And this type pays attention to time, energy, and money. And they're also the type that's most inclined to be nurturing of others. So you'll always have the dichotomy of both. I'm going to be self-focused as a self-pres, but I'm going to have resources, and I may share them with you.
So my experience with my self-pres friends is that if I tell them that I can't get together for maybe that I have a cold or I don't
Yeah.
feel well, they're very, very understanding.
Very.
They may even help me figure out how to get well quicker.
Yes.
Whereas my social instinct or sexual instinct friends, they don't quite have as much empathy around that. So that's another thing I find too, is that we have a lot of empathy around our particular instinct. And now we'd like to take a look at some video examples of social instinct. How did you know that your instinctual subtype was social?
My primary is social. I want group acceptance. I'm very comfortable in groups. I protect the herd, you might say.
Being in a group as a social instinct is very important, and feeling like I am supported in the group and feeling that I have some sort of ranking in the group is really important to me.
Mostly for the fact that I have a really strong desire to not so much belong with a group, but have an identity amongst a group.
Although I did not fraternize much with people in the class, I knew almost everything about them. And I knew all their names. I mean, and if you showed me a picture of a class, I would be able to identify everybody in the class, even now.
So here what we're seeing.
That's such a great example.
Yeah, that last example is just fantastic, where he knew the names of everyone in the class.
Yeah.
And with the social instinct, if you think about it, if you're part of the class is like your herd, and you have to know who they are. That's part of your survival strategy.
And tracking all those details and needing that identity in that group or class or the family of man, so to speak.
Exactly, like Ashley even used the word identity, that she wanted to have an identity in the group, and Tom is talking about wanting to protect the group. It's all, the focus is on the group. The focus isn't on the body anymore. It's on to survive. I've got to know what's going on with the group. And a key piece here is that a social instinct doesn't mean that you're a party person.
No.
It doesn't mean you're an extrovert.
You can be antisocial.
You can be antisocial, exactly. So we see a lot of people that are social instinct, and they may be identified with a group that as a whole is sort of an antisocial group.
Yes.
So can you give us some good examples here on the collage?
Well, the center image says people. And if we think about the Oscars, that's a great example of the social instinct. It's measuring people. Who's the most beautiful? Who did the best job? Who worked on what project? So all the images somehow or another have groups. Now this research was done in 1995, so the political climate at the time was different than it is now, but we could say basically the same thing. There are different tribes, different groups of people. And there are images about aspiration, about being together, about etiquette, and what you should or shouldn't do when you're with others. So it's about belonging, it's about connecting.
So social instincts are very focused on what other people are doing with other people.
Absolutely.
And wanting to know where they stand within a group, kind of what their prestige is. This seems to be the main focus. And the fear out of the research is it's a fear of not belonging or of low ranking.
Of being outcast, of being excluded. Sometimes social subtypes won't even venture forward because the fear of being excluded is so great. And maybe they wouldn't have been excluded, but there's an awareness of it, a tracking of what people are doing and whether they'll include you or not.
I think that word tracking is really critical, is that for each of us, whichever our instinct it is, we're tracking that area of life, and we kind of see things through that lens all the time. And without learning these instincts, it can be very hard to honor or understand that someone else has a different instinct, and what they're valuing and tracking and what their motivation is really different. So is there another example from the collage that you particularly like?
Well, yes, in the grouping, I'd also want to say that they've determined that gossip is an important part of survival. And the reason for that is when people talk to one another and track others, they know what's going on, where the water's good or bad or safe or unsafe.
Right. I mean, if you think about through human evolution, we always survived, and I think they're saying mostly like groups of 200. So you'd have to have really good social instincts to understand what you need to do to belong and survive. So next, what we'd like to do is let's take a look at the sexual or the one-to-one instinct. How do you know your instinctual subtype, or how did you recognize it when you first learned it?
I would think that I've always been in a tight, bonded relationship. That was a really easy one because I'm very intense and very passionate.
Because I always want to connect, really want to be close.
The focus has been really on the closeness and the intimacy and the affection and the conversations and the time together. And I just feel lost without that one-to-one time. I think that tells me a lot about it.
I very much wanted, when I went to visit him, that it was just us that hung out.
I've always longed for that special relationship. It's just always been so.
It seems even in these examples, you hear words like wanting to be bonded in the relationship. This is also the intense version of the type.
Yeah, the most intense type.
What else did you notice in the exemplars?
Well, that they all focused on the relationship and focused on the special someone and addressing the need for a mate and to be bonded. This is the type that wants an affinity, to be in sync with the other. There's a tremendous need to survive in terms of what the connection is as opposed to what the group's doing. There's more twinkle and shine. This instinct wants to be attractive because they have a fear of being undesirable. So it's not about being excluded. It's about the significant person in their life not finding them attractive enough to want to protect them, take care of them, to be drawn to them, so that they have a sense of power and influence.
So what would you say the main fear of this particular instinct is?
Undesirability. It's, in a way, it's unattractive, but no one wants to be unattractive. It's more undesirable, whether it's the way we dress or our personality. We're going to do something to create a way in which others that are really important to us, not everybody, just a select few, that will find us really desirable.
And is this the type that's more likely to accentuate their gender in terms of their presentation?
Yes, this is like the peacock, the masculine and feminine roles in nature of exaggerating what will draw others to us. So for example, we're going to care more about our appearance than the self-pres or the social. The social's going to want to match their group, their tribe. We're going to want to stand out in a singular way.
So the self-pres dresses for the body, the social is dressing to match their group, and the sexual is dressing to attract in a mate or to sort of maximize their attractiveness.
And individuality, their personal charms, so to speak. So on this collage, you see there are a lot of things having to do with the heart. Now, all types can be heartful, but it's the sexual one-to-one type that's focused on the intensity of the relationship dynamics, of the closeness. So all the pictures are about being close, and these were sent in by participants that knew that they were the sexual one-to-one type. So all our romance in an extreme way is more indicative of the sexual instinct.
It seems important to note, too, that this is not just about actual sex, but this is about wanting deep intimacy.
Yes.
And above the different instincts, this is the type that actually wants to have heart connection with romantic connection the most.
They want them together.
Right. They want it together at the same time. So when I look at the collage, we see a lot of intense eye energy, and I notice that with sexual instincts that they're very comfortable making a lot of intense eye contact. I mean, you and I are both sexual instinct.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about going deeper.
For better or worse.
Yeah, wanting to have deeper understanding. Whereas with the social, they're more doing the interview overview and checking everybody else out. Right. And the self-pres, you know, a conversation could be nice, but they don't want to get right in here like this and really see.
Or at least not for long. A lot of people will complain about the sexual instinct because there'll be too much eye contact, too much of a need to pair up and be just a unit as opposed to matching the group or tending to whatever's needed for the body.
Right. Okay, well, next, what we're going to do is we're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come back with a live panel that we're going to interview with an exemplar from each of the instincts. And I suggest that if you can, you might want to pause the show, go to Enneagram.net, take our instincts test if you don't know your instinct, come back and watch the panel. Welcome back. And now we have a panel of the 3 different instincts. And we're going to get a live example of what it's like to have each of these instincts dominant in your life. So I'd like to start with asking the panel to introduce themselves and to tell us their name, their instinct, and their tri-type.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm a self-pres 1 with 2-5 as my tri-type.
Hi, I'm Peggy, and I identify with the social instinct, and my tri-type is 2-6-1.
And my name is Spencer. I'm a sexual 8 with a 6-4 tri-type.
That's always so intriguing because it sounds complex, but basically what's helpful for us is to understand what your dominant instinct is and how you discovered it, because it takes a while. So Joanne, how did you know that you were a self-pres?
It's about managing resources is my priority. So time, energy, money, you know, making sure I get to sleep on time, making sure, you know, I know where things are, you know, so a sense of security, a sense of safety, a sense of, you know, being oriented in time and space. But it's always managing that juggling of, you know, getting enough sleep, you know, making sure I have time to get where I need to go safely, things like that.
So, and comfort, is that important too?
Comfort is, it changes and it varies, but yes, there is a level of comfort required and a sense of consistency in comfort.
Of course, you've been unbelievably generous sharing your time, actually all three of you, by being in our earlier shootings, and you were in the montage today, and that required a lot of energy and time on your part.
Correct. It is a challenge to engage. That always requires much more energy than probably for some of the other types where it's a more natural thing, but yes.
And you very generously brought the food, which is very nurturing and very much appreciated. Well, and that's the high side of this self-pres. We really, really appreciate it. And Peggy, as a social instinct, how did you decide between self-pres, social, and sexual one-to-one? What was the determining factor for you?
Looking over the arc of my life, being the quintessential hostess was always something that I really enjoyed as sort of the high side of the social instinct. It was always very important to me to feel like I fit into the group and I could give back to the group in some sort of way, and I did this by entertaining in my home, and I really enjoyed having my home look beautiful and having people over and enjoy that. It gave me a lot of pleasure.
And you really have facilitated many, many events for us, which we're very grateful. And it seems so taxing to me as a one-to-one, but how does it give you energy?
I just like being able to use my creative talents in that way. I get a lot of energy being around people and connecting with them. I do like to connect with the people that come to my home. And it just makes me feel good to be able to give those resources in that way.
It's very different, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. And Spencer, how did you know that you were a sexual one-to-one instinct?
It was kind of actually pretty easy. I grew up with it, you know, being your son and all.
Yeah.
But the key thing was I actually had this best friend that was a social subtype. And I always considered myself social until there was many times where I'd be going over to his house, and he lived in a neighborhood where 8 out of 10 of the friends we hung out with at school lived 2 blocks away. And it would drive me crazy when I'd go over to visit him, and then all of his friends would come over. And all of a sudden I started realizing that my one-to-one time was being taken away from me. And even though I very much enjoyed all those other people and liked hanging out with them, it wasn't about, you know, okay, I'll hang out with Chris on Tuesday. I'll hang out with, you know, Jason on Wednesday. You know, I would rather compartmentalize and have individual bonding times.
Yeah, that's a great example because you didn't get your energy from the group, even though you enjoyed it. You wanted the energy of you and your best friend.
Right.
I remember it well. I remember you getting in trouble actually once, and the principal saying, "Oh, no, Spencer explained that it was all about the difference between the two instincts." I'll never forget that.
I used that a bunch, yes.
And he goes, "What was he talking about?" I said, "Well, let me tell you." But that's so key. And yet, I'm imagining that you're here and willing to give this time based on the bond that you and I share, and you and David share, as opposed to wanting to be here.
Yes, I would definitely say that this choice of activity would not be at the top of my list. However, helping someone who I really, really care about, who it kind of supersedes everything else. And it's like, okay, I'll be there for them. It's that, relationship, and I know they do the same for me. So.
Yeah, that's a great example. And David, is there anything you want me to add, or do you want me to go on?
Well, I had a question. When we teach the instincts, people will often say, well, wow, I see that I do some self-pres stuff, and sometimes I act like a social, and sometimes I act like a sexual. How do I know which one it is? And I'll often say, well, track what makes you behave badly. Yeah. And really what I mean by that is that when we become anxious or stressed, or maybe we get defensive. So I'm curious for each of you, I'm a sexual, certainly know what it is for myself, but what is it that happens in your life that will trigger your instinct, that will then make you behave badly? Now that could be something very simple like just being in a grumpy mood or feeling anxious or upset. So I'm curious for each of you, based on your instinct, what it is that if something happens, that instinct gets triggered for you, or that survival issue gets triggered for you.
For me, it's time, being late, not having enough time. Just always feeling like I'm watching the clock and having to budget and meter time, because time for me is energy. So, so running late will really stress me out, or other people being late will really stress me out, so, because it's cost of time.
And what about issues around health or money? Those are often self-pres themes. Do they affect you?
They do affect me. Obviously when anybody is ill, they go to their self-pres. But for me, time is probably, the way it translates for me, is probably the most critical issue. I will sacrifice money for time, because for me, time equals energy. You can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. And so that's my currency.
Yeah, it's a great point, because each self-pres will be focused on something else. For one self-pres, it might be money. Another, it'll be time. Another, it'll be energy. And another, it might be the resources of food or the home.
And Joanne, just real simply, how do you know when your sort of a survival alarm bell has gone off? What
Usually
happens
I'll have a
you?
tantrum,
okay.
or some kind of emotional meltdown, or get cranky, or just, in some way just, not be my normal self. And a sense of anxiety will rise. Usually what happens, I'm sitting there and my foot's tapping and I'm getting a little huffy and I'm getting a little cranky, and it's like, and then I have to have the conversation of, okay, calm down, the world is not coming to an end, and just sort of try to get back to normal.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you just said, to have the conversation, because I think once we know what our drive is, then if we do get anxious, we kind of know how to self-soothe better, and those around us can know how to help soothe us better. So it allows us to get out of that sort of automatic reaction a lot quicker. So Peggy, what about you? How do you know when your social instinct is getting triggered, or what might trigger it for you?
Something that happened recently, this is somewhat of a superficial kind of example, but I was invited to a party, and my husband and I went, and I didn't realize it was a themed party, and so people were dressed a certain way, and I did not have the dress, the right attire for this Mad Men themed party, and I felt like I would rather have ants crawling up my nose than go to this party and be there knowing that, everyone was kind of checking each other out, or at least I was, and I didn't have the themed dress on. So that was, it was really interesting to me that I still react in that way.
It's destabilizing for sure. Yeah. I had a friend that went to an event with me where most people wore white. I didn't worry about it because I'm the one-to-one. Yes. Well, when she saw that most people were in white, it was really upsetting to her, even though she knew that it was just social instinct. So yes, it's a great example.
It is, because the sense here is that for the social, if I don't match my group, it's danger. This is like a fight or flight response. Right. And it's not necessarily, for most of us, it's not rational. Right. The high side is we often develop a tremendous talent around it, which we'll look into a little bit in a minute. So Spencer, what about for you? Like, what triggers your instinct, or when you know that that sexual instinct drive has gotten triggered, or it's not being met? How do you experience that, or do you have an example of what would do that for you?
Yeah, I'd probably say it comes up most with like girlfriends. I've had not all my girlfriends have been one-to-one like I am, so they don't always necessarily handle an emotional situation the same way. If they were to pull away, for example, and I lose that connect, then a different me comes out, and I do anything I can to get that back. Even if what they're doing is, hey, I just need space. It's totally rational. It's totally like, it's taking me a really long time to understand that that's kind of what I'm going through. And it's like, okay, everyone's different, separate, but it's still really hard because I know everything's okay when it's all in sync again. That's how I know. So.
Right, that's a great example for the sexual instinct, because the sexual instinct, their survival feels like it's dependent on being in sync.
Absolutely.
And that's the perfect word. And as a sexual subtype couple and business partners, that's the issue for us all the time. You know, are we in sync? You know, are we doing things the way we each want to do it? And if we're not, then both of our issues start to come up. So that's a really good question. So, Katherine, do you want to begin to explore this question here?
Yeah, I wanted to quickly ask you, how has it helped you knowing that you had the dominant instinct that you did? Anything in particular come to mind that you might want to share?
Or help your relationships?
Yeah.
So either personally, or how has it helped you in your relationships to know your instinct?
Well, for me, you know, things like, especially traveling with other people, there's always this sense of having a need to do things in a certain timeline, you know, need to travel so long, rest so long, stop for food or whatever. So I had to make the conscious decision to say, okay, I have to let that go. I have to suspend my need for a particular comfort or a particular timeline.
That's a great way to say it.
To be able to actually travel with others or to do things with other people. You know, it's sort of like, okay, now operate in a more group dynamic. And so you become aware and hopefully adapt.
That's hard for all of us, but I do get what you're saying. And I think maybe it's really easier for a social subtype to focus on trying to adapt accordingly.
I used to use an example when we taught that when my sister and I were little kids, we lived next to a very, very steep hill, and we would get on a piece of cardboard and we'd climb to the top and we'd slide all the way to the bottom. And once you got on that cardboard and you started sliding, there was no way to stop. You were either going to fall off and roll to the bottom of the hill or stay on the cardboard. But it's like your instinct. Once it's triggered, it's really, really hard to reel it back in, like what Spencer was showing.
Yeah, it has to run its course.
It kind of runs its course because the nervous system, the brain is saying, alert, alert, alert. So that's why this becomes this sort of lifelong meditative practice. And for a lot of people, it's like a spiritual practice in the sense that being present and not always sort of buying into the alert that the instinct is telling you often really helps people. So, Peggy, what about for you? How has it helped you in your relationships or with yourself to know your instinct?
Well, one of the ways I'm learning to actually show up more authentically in a group is to notice when those triggers are coming up of thinking maybe I'm not enough or somehow I'm not measuring up. Because I find that I shut down and not only do people not really get to know who I am, but I also don't take the time to really understand who they are. Because I've judged myself and others in a way that sort of shut down the intimacy. And also in other relationships, learning to have balance and knowing that in my family life that I spend time in sort of my social esoteric pursuits, but then I also have time for my relationship with my husband and also for being connected to my kids and their social activities in a way that I wouldn't necessarily choose, but I do it because it's part of all of who I am.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it, balance. Because you're not going to stop being a social instinct.
Exactly.
You can just be a healthier expression of it or recognize.
Yeah, and in balancing all three instincts as well, but in my social instinct, balancing my social pursuits in that way.
Great, thank you.
So Spencer, how has it helped you in your relationships or just in your own personal growth to know your instinct?
I mean, I guess it's more personal awareness more than anything. I don't want to repeat the example I used before, but that's really probably the most crucial area. It doesn't have to be intimate relationships. It could be platonic as well. Just understanding that how many things aren't personal. So many things come across as personal because everything that I do is for personal reasons. I do it because I'm trying to show, hey, I want you to know that I'm there for you, that we're locked, we're solid, and if someone doesn't do the same, it took me a long time, but it really helps with understanding that, not everyone's trying to send the same message. It could just be anything,
Yeah, that's really so true, so very, very true.
Yeah.
So Spencer, you have an interesting career where you actually are helping people every single day, a lot of whom are ill, and I'm wondering if your instinct shows up in that in terms of the way that you want to connect with them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
How would you see that?
I mean, I remember their kids' names. They would go on a trip and they come back, and I remember because I like making that personal bond with them, and it's important to me that they know that I've made that bond with them. It's not just selfish where I need the bond. I also need them to know, like, hey, I'm calling you by your first name. I remember you. Like, you are an important person, and so it definitely comes up because I can't do it any other way. Like, I can't just be like, okay, next person, like DMV style. I just can't do it. So,
so it's really seeing somebody as an individual and as a unique individual, and
yes.
wanting to make that personal connection.
Yes,
and that's very much that instinct.
And he's one-to-one social.
Right.
Social second. So
right.
that's what happens
right.
when the two are in tandem, that they're both critical, but the personal bond is leading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whereas I have self-pres second. I'm really mean to people. No. So when you think about which two types are the most dominant, they do create something very particular, especially with the tri-type and the instincts. So Joanne, in your case, the 5 in your tri-type would make you even more reserved. That's a good distinction. And Peggy, you have the 6 in yours, which is going to make you come out and want to engage with others more. And Spencer, having the 4, 6, and 8 are the 3 most declarative types. They have to call off what's going on, as David with that tri-type. Whereas I have the 7 in mine. I'm going to smooth things out. So it's wonderful to look at them together. But the driving force is like, what triggers the whole system? What triggers the Enneagram type? It's the instinct.
So what would be the talent that you see that you have from your instinct that maybe is something that's easy for you to do that you've noticed that it isn't so easy for other people to do that might be a different instinct?
I think it's just a matter of being cautious and trying to make sure that not only am I safe or that needs are met in some way, that that something is fixed or repaired. I mean, I saw water on the floor and I made sure they knew in the store that there was water on the floor, and it wasn't a lot, but somebody could have fallen. So it's something like that. It's
And that's 1 and self-pres
it's
coming.
1 and self-pres coming
great.
together.
It's a great example.
And for me, I think it would be in gathering people together and for not necessarily for a cause, but sometimes for a cause, and giving a contribution in that way. Also in making people feel welcome and at home, and having a sense of social graciousness in that way.
You're extraordinarily gracious.
Thank you. That's much what I can think of.
It is a gift and attribute, actually.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and Spencer, what about for you? And you've shared some of this already, but as a sexual instinct, what talent do you see that shows for you?
I guess not to say that others don't, exhibit this or exhibit it well, but it comes from like a selfish place, I would think, but empathy, because I so very much need that connection to be good. It's very, very easy for me to notice if someone's off. Very, very easy for me to know, especially if it's someone important to me, best friend, girlfriend, whatever. And so therefore, I'm very, very good at listening, very, very good at being supportive, because I need them to feel okay. Like, I need that. So selfish or not, it makes me really, really good at it.
Mm-hmm. So you're really good at seeing whether you've got that in-sync connection.
Right. Yeah, it's just, I can feel it. They could be in another room, I bet you I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's an energy.
Yeah, it definitely is. So we've got about 10 more minutes, so lots more good stuff to explore. Mm-hmm. Katherine, do you have a question that you'd like to ask?
Yes. When you think about your experience as a child, Like sometimes it's easier to see. Was there anything that any of you noticed when you were a child? Spencer gave a great example with his friend when he didn't really understand what it was until I taught him, but he was already exhibiting that. So for example, my elder son, he couldn't miss daycare because he had to go say hi to the kids before he wanted to spend time with me. I remember thinking, hey, but I have a day off. Whereas Spencer, being this sexual one-to-one, it was forget the kids. You know, the bond with mom, or mommy in that case, was much more significant. So parenting, being parented. So is there anything more that you'd want to add about what your experience was like as a child and noticing maybe this similarity or difference with a parent or sibling?
Well, when I was a child, I'm the oldest of 4. And so, you know, when my parents would go shopping, it was like the ducklings. You know, we were all lined up. But I was always in the back, herding my younger sisters. So, you know, as the one, you know, and the self-pres, I was the one that was making sure nobody got lost. And this is when I was a small child. So there was that high level of responsibility that the one has, but also the instinct to make sure that everybody is safe and we, you know, that they don't hide. And I remember my sister ran and hid under some coats once, and I just absolutely panicked because I couldn't find her. And, you know, this was when I was probably, you know, I might have been 10 years old. So, you know, you are what you are from
it
the
rises
beginning.
up, doesn't it?
You know, so, you know, and that was always the way I was. I was the responsible, conscientious,
self-present one coming together.
Yeah, and so that was monitoring it, making sure all the little ducklings were lined up and safe.
I love that word choice, monitoring, because that is what the self-pres does. It monitors the environment and the potential for danger. Like I would have just said, I'll find a better hiding place. It wouldn't even have occurred to me that a sibling needed to be in tow. Instead, it would have been, oh, well, I can hide better than that.
And it wasn't something my parents told me to do.
Right.
It was just, this was just something that it was always that way.
Thank you, Joy. Peggy?
I was the 6th child in a family of 7, and
that's a social group.
That's a social group, and I remember feeling responsible for really taking care of the emotional feelings in the group. And I wrote in a journal once that it's been a good day when everyone's happy, and I do think that I felt personally responsible for the happiness of my family members, and it was a good day. I felt like I'd done a good job if I managed to keep everyone happy by being a good girl or being whatever it was that they needed, and not feeling like I needed to have any needs or desires or express the emotions that I was really feeling. So that's how that played out in my family when I was younger. And then as I was in high school and a little older, I was very social, cheerleading, dancing, a class officer, bringing people together. That was really important to me. And
well, just those roles. What we didn't say about this, the social instinct, is they identify with the role,
right,
or the identity, whatever it is they need to do to be a part of, and each one of those is a role.
Right, right. And even in high school, it was still very important that I was everybody's friend, and that, you know, I moved in a lot of different social circles. I was able to do that, and keeping people happy and relationships going.
You see, the social too is the people networker.
Yes.
More than any other type, they know everyone everywhere, at least a little bit, and making them happy is really critical.
Yes.
So when you combine those elements, it's pretty dynamic. Right. But then that's also a lot of pressure.
Absolutely.
Because you have to also track the happiness of a lot of people.
Right, and forego what's really going on with myself.
And the high side of the social instinct is that you know how to sacrifice your personal for the sake of the whole.
Yes, absolutely.
The low side is you're always tracking where you fit in,
right,
and have the fear of being excluded.
Yes, yeah.
That's a great example. The minute you have 4 people, you're in group dynamics. That's a great example.
I hope this answers the question correctly, but I have this memory of when I was a kid, and I think it was like 4th grade.
I didn't mean it.
and everyone had to come up with a poster, and in the center had to be like some animal that they were identified with or something along those lines. And I found mine really, really quickly and started noticing a bunch of kids having issues with that. And so I kind of turned to the kid next to me, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I don't know what even inspired me to do this, but I started asking them a bunch of questions about themselves and started making that one-to-one relationship, and found out, okay, oh, well, I also watched Discovery Channel a lot and loved animals, so combine that in.
Shark Week.
Right, exactly. Oh, yeah, Shark Week. Yeah, and so I would make a personal bond, and then I would, from that, be like, oh, well, this animal would be good, blah, blah, blah. And other kids overheard me, and then so all of a sudden I'm going to each kid, which I loved. I was getting to know a bunch of kids I didn't know yet, and so, yeah, I remember that because it made it really, really helpful. And I definitely remember using that when I was a kid. And then as I got older, getting into high school, there's a lot more drama. Everything was always wrong. Long phone calls. Stuff that doesn't even matter now, of course, but when you're a kid, it's everything. And so, yeah, once again, that shined through me listening and being supportive and all that.
And that is an important quality to the one-to-one instinct, is to have that intimacy, the confidences, the relationship that is deeper. Not how are you doing, who'd you do it with, what was fun, but more, okay, how is this about you on a deeper level?
Right.
And actually, many therapists are one-to-one instincts because it's a natural place to do that, and those that are not one-to-one first often have it in the second position because it facilitates that. So anything you want to
Well, I have
add?
one more question, as I think we have a little bit of time left. Katherine did a study on the instincts and intimacy that was actually validated by the University of California at Davis, and the amazing thing is it showed, it was statistically validated, that each instinct actually has a certain way that they like to experience intimacy, in terms of what would make them feel loved or validated, and that this was really important in their relationships, that their mate or their significant others understood, for example, on their birthday, what it is that they would like the most or what would be the best for them. So if you think about it for a minute, what in terms of intimacy in the sense of your best friends or looks like we're getting low on time so quickly. What is it that someone can show you that they love you in the sense through your instinct?
In one word.
Care. Just, doing something that would show care.
I'd like to feel supported in my social pursuits.
I'd say affection, feeling actually loved and, feeling that affection, on a deeper level.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember that was so amazing with that study was that it was so applicable to couples because, for example, if the wife was a social instinct, what she wanted on her birthday wasn't the romantic dinner with her husband. Yeah. It was to have all of her friends come over.
Yeah. Celebration.
And, celebration. And whereas if the wife had been a sexual instinct, what she would want would be maybe, some acknowledgement of the depth of the love from the husband. So it's very specific in terms of how we want that done. Whereas my sister, for example, is a self-pres, and if her husband gets her a really spiffy new vacuum for her birthday, she's really happy, right? Whereas I think, Katherine would probably, that wouldn't work for her very well as a sexual. So
it wouldn't be first on my list.
It wouldn't be first on your list. But even what we want in terms of our relationships, and that's why when we do a lot of coaching and work with couples or work teams, that the instinct is really more influential and more powerful than anything else. So what we'd like to do now is I want to thank all of you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Really appreciate your time and your wonderful answers, and I'm sure it'll be very educational for people. And so for those of you who have been watching the show, if you'd like to get more information, you can visit us online. Our website is enneagram.net. We have several Enneagram tests there. There's an instinctual subtype test there. If you like Twitter, our Twitter handle is Enneagram. You can find us on Facebook too, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.